Do not retire before you pay off your mortgage. This is not my advice in any way, shape, or form, but rather one of the most common thought processes that I've come across over the last 12 years working with clients. Do you know the biggest mistake that I see pre-retirees make when trying to make the decision between paying off their mortgage before retirement versus investing? It's not always what you might expect, especially for those that fall into the age range between 50 and 65 years old and have a prime focus on their financial future. And although the decision can feel simple, become debt-free and live a simple life, it can be far more complex than that. Today, I'm going to show you why the situation is not always clean-cut and black and white, in addition to the steps that I use with clients to help them work through their specific decisions. So let's take a closer look at what's really at stake here. For many people I speak to, as they approach retirement, the feeling and thought of being debt-free is something that is extremely desirable in most cases. Many times, they have a feeling or a mindset that paying off your mortgage and having no debt provides financial stability, and that is what you should be aiming for as you get closer to the finish line. No more monthly payments, no more debt hanging over your head. It kind of does sound like that could be a really nice way to enter the next chapter in life. And while the emotional relief could feel comforting, there could be a cost associated as well, in potentially missing out on any compounding growth that you could have investing over time. When you focus on putting every dollar that you have towards your mortgage, you're essentially tying that money up in an illiquid asset, as opposed to keeping that money free-flowing and liquid and potentially investing in the markets. Now picture this. You reach retirement, you're completely debt-free, and then an unexpected expense comes up, leaving you scrambling for liquidity as you tied up all of your money in trying to turbocharge those mortgage payments. In some cases, this could leave one scrambling for money, not knowing what to do, potentially having to take out a loan, or even selling investments at an inopportune time to create the needed cash. And this is where the concept of opportunity cost comes into play. Every time you take that extra money and you put it towards your mortgage, it comes with a trade-off. So let's put this into perspective. Over time, historically speaking, the S&P 500 has achieved a rate of return of about 8 to 10% annually, while mortgages in recent years fall somewhere between a 3% to 5% rate of interest. If your mortgage interest is at the lower end of that range, let's look at things through this lens. Consider the return, quote unquote, that you receive for paying that mortgage off early. If your mortgage is around 4%, that could be the rate of return that you're achieving on that money annually. But if you invest that same money in the stock market over time, theoretically, you could be achieving a compounded rate of return between 8 to 10%. A caveat that I find of importance to bring up is having the realization that that feeling of being debt-free is not just a rational calculation, but it also can be a very emotional decision as well. Knowing that your home is fully paid off could bring one a feeling of confidence and safety, which is very hard to ignore in the instances that I've seen personally. But the fact that you're locking that money up in an illiquid asset is something that I find also important to consider and something I cannot turn a blind eye to. The next factor I like to take into consideration is understanding how that interest rate attached to your mortgage could potentially influence your financial situation moving forward as you approach retirement. This single figure can be very important in having an understanding of which decision you should make. Should you be choosing to accelerate your efforts in eliminating debt, or should you be investing that money? As I stated earlier, if you have a low rate, around 3 to 4%, there could be a compelling case to say, hey, maybe you should invest this money instead. While markets can fluctuate, and there are certainly never any guarantees, let's just say, for instance, I have a 4% mortgage. Every dollar that I put towards that 4% mortgage saves me $4,000 for every $100,000 of debt per year. When compared to the compounding potential of the stock market, looking at a number between 8 to 10%, that same $100,000 could be gaining $8,000 to $10,000 annually. And I will say, as always, it's very important to take into account other pieces to the puzzle, such as fees, taxes, and your personal situation. Now let's take a look at the other side of things. Say your mortgage rate is 6% or higher. In this situation, paying down that mortgage quicker could save you 6%, which could equate to $6,000 per $100,000 per year. And when the interest that you're paying on the debt has the potential to rival or even exceed the expected returns that you could be earning in the stock market, it makes for quite a case to accelerate those payments and pay down the debt first. And being aware that investment returns are not guaranteed, markets can go through cycles and fluctuations can happen, we need to keep in mind that downturns are par for the course. So when I walk through this process, in addition to the factors that I mentioned earlier, I'm also taking into account one's risk tolerance as well as their time horizon. For someone uncomfortable with the potential for market swings or who might be closer to retirement, they may prefer accelerating their payments to get that mortgage down as opposed to taking the chance and the perceived risk that comes with investing the money. While for others, especially those who have a longer time horizon or who have built up a substantial nest egg, carrying a low-rate mortgage might be more comfortable to them. One of the biggest factors when it comes to my preference in making the decision is having flexibility. If I have investments that provide liquidity, which I can access in the event of emergency, or if I just simply need the funds, that could be more appealing to someone like me as opposed to locking my money up in an illiquid asset such as a home. Although not a perfect roadmap every time, I do think that there is reason to consider comparing your mortgage rate versus your expected rate of return in the markets as a great framework and starting point of how to make this decision. And as I build out my framework, there's another step that I feel sometimes is overlooked. The timing of my payments, whether I'm earlier on in the mortgage or in the later part of the life of the loan, could have significant implications on the benefit to me, whether it makes most sense to pay that mortgage down in rapid fashion or invest the money. And why does this matter, you might ask? Because mortgages are structured around a process called amortization, where a portion of that money goes towards principal and a portion goes towards interest. In the earlier years of a 30-year mortgage, the majority of that money that you're making as far as a payment is concerned is going towards paying down the interest, and a smaller portion is going towards paying down the principal. And over time, this ratio typically shifts, whereas towards the later part of the loan, you're paying down a larger portion of principal and a smaller portion of your payment is going towards that interest. In other words, simply looking at things, if you're accelerating your payments in the earlier portion of the loan, you could be really denting that amount of interest that you have to pay over time. By year 20, however, that same payment might only save a fraction of what it was saving you years earlier. For me, the bottom line is, as this impact and potential savings shifts over time, so does my thought process in how much I should invest versus how much I should be putting towards the mortgage. It's also important to read the fine print on your mortgage, as in some cases there are prepayment penalties associated with these loans, whereby you could be getting charged extra fees for making extra payments. And although this decision might seem like a major fork in the road, I like to relax and think it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to make one choice at the expense of the other. You might find comfort in a more balanced approach, whereby you end up splitting those extra resources between paying off the mortgage and building wealth simultaneously. An example might look something like whether you receive an inheritance, or a bonus at work, or a raise, you use those extra funds and you split a portion to go towards paying off the mortgage in an added accelerated fashion, in addition to putting some of that money into your investment account. This method can help you not only pay down that mortgage in an accelerated fashion, but also help you potentially grow your investments over time, and most importantly, potentially eliminate the thought of regret in making one decision over the other. Another tactic to consider is making bi-weekly mortgage payments rather than monthly payments. So at the end of the day, the result here is you could end up making a full extra payment throughout the course of the year. Over the life of the mortgage, by doing this, you have the ability to potentially cut down the life of the loan significantly and end up saving a significant portion of money. At the same time, continuously adding money to your investment account could allow that wealth to grow over time and have the potential for compounding returns. For me, I find comfort in understanding that I have a solid financial foundation prior to splitting up any additional monies in either direction. Eliminating high interest debts, things like credit cards or personal loans, is key in my mind, in addition to making sure I have some sort of an emergency fund which is flush with cash. I personally choose to automate my savings so I don't have to think twice and I know that the money is being divided up as to how I want it to be. And this approach isn't just strictly about numbers. It's about flexibility and peace of mind for me. While the markets as well as my personal situation could change, having this flexibility brings me confidence as I charge forward in making decisions. Because as I've seen time and time again, although some folks might feel uneasy about carrying a mortgage into retirement, they might also have a feeling of missing out on potential growth in future years. So I maintain the mindset that these financial decisions do not have to solely be made inside a vacuum. Even with a plan in place, emotions can end up coming into play and influencing how money is managed over time. The desire for security, the fear of missing out, and the potential comfort of being debt-free can all play a factor and a role in making the decisions that we make, which at the end of the day might not be completely rational. So recognizing how emotions might interact with financial decisions could end up helping you better align yourself with your goals. And while there might be the satisfaction of knowing that you've eliminated your mortgage, you have no more monthly payments, and this is the culmination of all of your years of hard work, becoming fully immersed in those feelings and mindset could potentially lead us astray and not bring us to maximize our full potential over time. An interesting example of this comes from financial writer Morgan Housel, who states in one of his writings that paying off his mortgage early was one of the dumbest things he has ever done. But he also stated that for he and his spouse, making this decision brought him a feeling of independence and confidence that far outweighed the potential for the gains that they might be leaving on the table otherwise. Their story illustrates how emotional comfort could outweigh objective analysis, even for those who know how to crunch the numbers. And although, depending on your calculations and how those numbers pan out, at the end of the day, by leaving this money on the table, you could end up missing out on significant returns and potential compounded growth years into the future. With that, regardless of the numbers, for those in a similar position or mindset of Morgan Housel, the ability to go to sleep at night, lay your head down, and know that you're debt-free and you can live in comfort might far outweigh any spreadsheet calculations. When weighing the decision in whether to pay down the mortgage in an accelerated fashion or invest the money, here's the 3 simple steps I follow. First, I compare the rate of interest on the mortgage to my expected returns from my investments. Second, I consider where I'm at in my mortgage term and how much liquidity I might need in the event of an emergency. And third, I try to find a balance of risk versus return and feeling of comfort in paying down my mortgage versus investing and how that aligns with my personal goals. As always, I find it helpful to work with a team of trusted professionals to help you come up with the best answer for you. And if you're wondering what other regrets retirees commonly have, check out our next video here.